The Epic of Gilgamesh is a product of ancient Mesopotamia, the geographical area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which includes Sumer, often regarded as the earliest civilization, and a series of other cultures and peoples, the Akkadians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, and others. The text recounts the life and exploits of the king of Uruk, the town known in the Bible as Erech, today Warka in southern Iraq. Although the story is clearly fictional and mythological, it probably has some basis in history. And indeed, scholars have determined that Gilgamesh himself was a historical figure who's thought to have reigned between 2800 and 2500 BC. In the Sumerian king list, a stone tablet from around 2000 BC, he figures as the fifth king to have ruled Uruk after the Great Flood. Predating the Homeric poems in Genesis, the Epic of Gilgamesh has the claim to fame of being the oldest, more extended literary text to be preserved. The story of this work is a complex one. It's an old legend that was presumably recounted orally for many years and then committed to writing. In antiquity, this work became widely known and was translated into different languages. Its celebrity is testified by the fact that fragments of it have been found all over the Middle East. It's a genuinely Mesopotamian product in the sense that it seems originally to have been a Sumerian story, which was then recounted repeatedly by the Babylonians, Akkadians, and others, with the story being shaped and modified in different ways by numerous retellings. It's thought that the different parts of the story were originally independent units, which were then collected by later editors into a continuous, longer text. The first known combined version dates from around 1800 BC and is written in Old Babylonian. This text, which survives only in fragmentary form, is entitled Surpassing All Other Kings. This differs from the more complete standard Akkadian version, which was put together at some point between 1300 and 1000 BC. This text bears the title, He Who Saw the Deep. These titles derive from the first words of the works. Around 700 BC, Araspanapool, the king of the Assyrian Empire, created a great library at Nineveh, near today's Mosul in Iraq. He ordered texts to be collected from throughout Mesopotamia and translated into Akkadian. One of these was the Epic of Gilgamesh. When the Assyrian Empire was defeated by the Babylonians in 612 BC, the library was destroyed. It lay under a great mound of dirt until it was discovered in the 1840s by the explorer Austin Henry Layard and his assistant Hormuzd Rassam. They sent thousands of unearthed clay tablets to the British Museum, having no idea what they contained. It took 20 years for scholars to decipher them. The key figure in this work was the English Orientalist and politician Henry Creswick Rawlinson, who determined most of the tablets were written in Akkadian and, after much trial and error, was able to establish the phonetic values of the cuneiform wedges. The story of Gilgamesh was found then at the British Museum in 12 cuneiform tablets written in Akkadian. Today, this is generally regarded as the best preserved text of the so-called standard version. So by contrast to the Bible or the Greek and Roman classics, where there's been a more or less unbroken tradition of transmission by means of copying and recopying of older texts, the Epic of Gilgamesh was lost to the world for 2.5 millennia and only rediscovered relatively recently. The credit for finding the text goes to George Smith, a young curator at the British Museum without any real formal education, who taught himself how to read the cuneiform tablets. In 1872, he found the text of Gilgamesh and was interested primarily in confirming the historical truth of the Old Testament in these tablets. He was immediately fascinated by the story of the flood in chapter 5, which has striking parallels to the biblical account. He translated this episode and presented his findings to the Biblical Archaeology Society on December 3, 1872, in a paper entitled The Chaldean Account of the Deluge. This created an immediate sensation, and from this time on, there was keen interest in the tablets and in the light that they could shed on biblical history. Riding the wave of this success, Smith achieved his dream of going to Nineveh for further excavations. In all, he led 3 such expeditions in 1872, 73, and 76. In 1874, he made the first English translation of the text of Gilgamesh with extensive commentary and interpretation. Only 2 years later, he died in Aleppo on the 3rd archaeological expedition at the age of 36. It should be noted that the Epic of Gilgamesh was not the only ancient text discovered among the tablets from the library. Also worthy of note is the Enuma Elish. It is Wind Above is the title. This is a creation story sometimes referred to as the Babylonian Genesis. There were also a number of fragmentary texts, such as religious or legal documents, which were of interest primarily to specialists. As these tablets and findings from other excavations show, the ancient Mesopotamians had a rich culture with an abundance of literary works.